Have you ever wondered why, amid the sharp crack of leather whips striking the ancient stones of the Via Dolorosa, certain women of the Bible stood silent, weeping on behalf of all humanity? Their untold story is more than a river of tears. It is grace flowering into redemption through pain and unshakable faith confronting tyranny. Today, we follow Miriam, an ordinary wife in Jerusalem, into a path of sacred justice and emerging courage. Tap subscribe now to discover the untold story and feel the modern connection resonating in your own heart. Passover once more approached. Jerusalem draped itself in dawn's blazing gold. A crimson sun slid slowly across the fortress. Stones kissed every dew-dark crevice, then scattered glittering dust over a marketplace barely awake. The clatter of crooked baskets, the bleating of sheep, and the clink of coins mingled with the scent of herb tea and dyed cloth, composing a vibrant symphony no traveler could forget. At the mouth of a narrow lane spilling into the square, a young woman, widowed at 36, balanced two heavy water jars. Her name was Miriam. Each step echoed the footsteps of countless unnamed women of Scripture, those who once nourished the city with sweat and cradled children with tireless efforts, yet left only faint breaths upon the desert sands of time. Yet within Miriam burned something unmistakable, an unquenchable hunger for wisdom. She yearned to read and ponder the sacred word, even though custom barred the gates of learning against every woman. Letters to her were more than symbols. They were keys opening the rose garden of divine intent, where every question of justice, existence, and human hope could bloom. That awareness, though quiet, had kindled in her a candle no prejudice could snuff out. While the sun's shadow still stretched along the alley, she slipped back into her clay brick room. The walls were sun-dried bricks, the roof a coarse thatch, yet inside grew a compact universe for mother and children. Miriam lit an oil lamp. Its wavering amber glow filled each corner, chasing away the chill left by eastern winter nights. Two children knelt at the straw mat's edge, fingers intertwined, eyes shut, while their mother bent to share a simple prayer. Planting faith in her children mattered as much as breath. Every whispered supplication breathed new life into the humble room, turning it into a private sanctuary ablaze with grace. At noon, neighbor Salome, a weaver, arrived. Amid the aroma of freshly baked barley bread, Salome reported that a young rabbi, Jesus of Nazareth, had healed her paralyzed cousin's daughter with a touch as light as wind. News drifted beneath every eave like pine resin warmed in sunlight. Hearing it, Miriam's smoldering seed of faith burst into tender shoots. Ancient stories of the one who would bring redemption sprang alive, radiant as stained glass catching the first ray of day. That afternoon, while mending her child's cloak, Miriam's heart thudded in heavy pulses. She pictured that man, imagined him passing beneath the city gate that very moment, road dust upon his face, and a silent vow ignited. If he truly was the promised one, she would surrender what little peace remained to follow. Though unspoken, the pledge bathed her surroundings in calm yet unyielding resolve. Night descended, desert winds skimmed the roof, carrying dry chill and the scent of wild grass. A slender moon scattered silver across the threshold. Miriam lulled her children to sleep, then leaned against the brick wall, listening as the city settled. Jerusalem's midnight stillness resembled black silk draped over vast sandstone, hiding heaven's secrets behind velvet dark. She closed her eyes, letting her thoughts coil into a drifting dream. In that dream, she saw an enormous cross blazing with emerald flame. From its summit, a spear of light pierced the sky, rending darkness, hurling shards of starlight downward. Amid the strange storm of light, a deep resonance, more vibration than voice, urged her, "Do not fear." It addressed her as daughter of Jerusalem, confirming her place in destiny's current. Light, summons, and the sensation of her hand being drawn forward fused into a sublime chord, at once sacred and daunting. She woke. Miriam's heart raced, yet remained steady. A clear strength filled the hollow of her chest. Night still clung to the window, but she knew she had witnessed a sign from beyond. Pressing a hand to her breast, she felt blood thrumming toward a new direction. Crimson dawn, the miracle report, the fiery dream. Each merged into a single arrow pointing her to the eye of an oncoming storm. There, courage would be forged in flame. Faith would be lashed by doubt. Yet, at the storm's center, sacred justice waited, veined like gold and stone. A lone rooster heralded the final watch. Miriam stepped into the narrow courtyard and gazed at a sky turning pewter with dawn. She knew the coming sunrise would resemble none before. It would awaken not only the city, but a rising tide sweeping her and many others into a story larger than themselves. Shoulders accustomed to hauling water now bore an unseen charge. Yet she stood straight as a pillar of stone. Deep within rang the conviction. The road ahead was no mere quest for miracles, but the full embrace of an ordinary woman's destiny inside redemption's triumphal canvas. Returning indoors, Miriam pinched out the lamp to save the final droplets of oil. Yet her spirit glowed brighter than ever. Darkness could not smother expectation. It only sharpened. At the break of the sixth dawn, a cold Roman trumpet blared from the guard camp. Its metallic cry sliced through the mist still draped over Jerusalem's stone roofs. That single sound jolted the city from the familiar festival rhythm of Passover and rolled a chill of iron across the winding streets. Miriam, 36, a widow, clutched her 2 children to her chest, crouching beneath a narrow archway as the ground vibrated under hundreds of boots surging toward the western gate. The crowd flooded forward like a river in spate, carrying red dust and the tang of rusted iron. Within the mounting clamor, a child's cry rang out, an echo of the haunting wail from Miriam's recent dream of green fire. She tightened her grip on the small shoulders beside her. Destiny, however, would not pause. Reaching a stony incline, she saw the condemned man stumble. The cross bit into his gaunt frame, blood mingled with sweat, running in dark streaks. Across a sea of jostling heads, his eyes lifted and met hers for the span of a heartbeat, conveying a silent warmth of grace that pushed the din right away. A whip lashed across the prisoner's back, snapping Miriam back to the present. The mob howled, yet at the roadside a handful of veiled women dropped to their knees, shoulders shaking with sobs. Their frailty was stark. No swords, no power, only tears before brutality. A centurion strode over. His armored arms shoved Miriam hard. Her water jar shattered, shards and water spraying wide. Pain flared along her shoulder, but larger than pain was the sense of her protective wall collapsing. Amid the circle of broken clay, an inner force whispered, "Stand up." It was no outer command, but an uprising voice within. Miriam knew the choice had arrived: hide in fear or rise as witness to justice greater than human law. The sky shifted to gunmetal gray. Thick clouds swallowed the blush of dawn, and desert wind flung sand against every face. The ground quivered, echoes of Sinai when the law descended. In that upheaval, a seed of courage sprouted. She stooped, lifted a shard, and felt blood beat at her fingertip, mingling with water to tint a pale crimson, an unspoken seal on an inner vow. Trumpets prodded the execution procession onward. The cross grated over stone. Salome herded the children back, eyes wild yet unable to quell a quiet resolve. Stepping clear of the spilled water, Miriam left wet footprints on the paving, an invisible thread tying widowhood to the torrent of events. Sand stung her skin, pigeons exploded from an eave. Each sting reminded her that flesh may ache, yet faith does not. Early sun pierced a gap in the clouds, glanced off soldier helmets, then brushed her narrow shoulders, tracing a faint rim of light around her upright silhouette. The crowd still roared, trumpets still screamed, yet in the hush between two breaths, Miriam sensed her role had changed, from frightened bystander to spark of defiance. Her stride fell in line behind the soldiers climbing toward the hill, the green fire of her dream serving as secret compass. Along that dusty road, she no longer wept alone. She advanced so that the untold stories of nameless hearts might resound within history. In the silence between two whip cracks, images from the fiery dream surged back. She saw a sky of jasper, a cross ablaze in undying green, and children crying her name in a whirlwind. Awake, she had not understood. Now every piece clicked. The street's cries echoed the vision, and the quiet heat in that wounded gaze confirmed a promise of redemption passed directly to her. Certainty ignited fierce motherhood within. Her two children stood as living proof of mercy after seasons of loss, and their trembling hooves engraved a duty upon her, beyond her small family, toward a wounded community. Knees shook, yet her heart held firm. The children's safety hinged on who would speak when injustice reigned, and Miriam felt destiny call her name in every breath and every trembling grasp. The heavens darkened further. Silent lightning flickered in the east, glinting off polished shields. The crowd wavered between curiosity and dread, exposing for an instant the fragility of human conscience. Every age, even streets far across America, reminds itself that justice collapses when courage falls silent, and when humanity nails its own hope to timber. That thought became her final lever. Miriam drew a long breath. Dust scorched her lungs, yet a surge of clean strength rose like spring water from a barren desert. She stared at the thin line of drying blood on her finger, accepting it as a signature beyond ink. As her feet moved on, the rough stone road transformed into hidden steps, elevating her into a new chapter, where nameless women's stories would be etched not merely in tears, but in brave blood, like sunrise breaking after a night that once seemed endless. Miriam clutched the freshly drawn water jar from the Siloam spring, pressing through a whirl of bodies that rumbled like a waterfall beneath the Antonia fortress. Passover banners still fluttered against the stone wall. Yet nothing could dispel the cold metallic air rolling off the Roman cohort. Every eye locked on the cross being dragged forward, hobnailed sandals scraped over dew-slick pavement, sweeping away the rhythms of daily life. Dust and sweat billowed into the parched air, coating curious faces in a gray mask of fear and fascination. Amid this chaos, the 36-year-old widow kept her balance, for the jar in her arms was no nameless gift, but the first act of a mission that had sprouted in a midnight dream. When the procession abruptly stalled beneath the city gate's arch, a fragile gap opened among the silver shields. Miriam knelt and lifted the jar toward the condemned man. The first droplet slid from the rim, touched his cracked lips, and sparkled like a diamond, gathering all the newborn light of dawn. The head bent slightly. In that instant, a radiance not of the sun flared around the rough wood. A strange violet halo licked across helmets, tinting cold stone with miraculous warmth. Even the whip crack froze in a single horrified beat. That supernatural glow etched an unchanging message into Miriam's heart. Though worldly power might crush a body, the seed of redemption still gestated in silence. A child's shrill crying ceased at once. Mothers who had torn at their hair fell mute, their wet eyes turning to calm seas. In the hush, as though all desert wind had been sucked away, Miriam knew the moment had come to turn compassion into action. The ancient shell of prejudice cracked, revealing a deep current of faith long waiting to surge. She rose and faced the women bent along the narrow street's edge. No words were needed. Her steady gaze sparked new resolve in theirs. Shaking hands wove into a supple, unbreakable circle, bundling shared pain like a levee against floodwaters. From its center, a psalm thrummed, low enough that guards had to strain to hear, yet persistent as an underground spring beneath the Judean desert. The melody irrigated weary hearts, teaching them that tears are a beginning, not an end. The soldiers spurred their horses. The heavy cross rattled up the cracked slope of Golgotha. Along the gravel path, Miriam folded into the crowd, matching her pace to the staggering victim ahead. When a stray lash struck a terrified little girl, she pivoted to shield the child, absorbing a welt across her worn tunic. Farther on, she knelt to bandage a bleeding youth pushed to the ground, tearing her veil for makeshift gauze. Each small gesture opened a slit of hope in the dusty gloom. That care flowed not from muscular strength, but from wisdom distilled during long night vigils in a clay brick room. With every deed, she became living proof that grace needs no throne. The crowd, once regarding her with the contempt reserved for poor widows, began to shift. Pity receded, making room for respect. Rumor spread as swiftly as sea wind. The woman shielding children and tending wounds might be the very mother of mercy spoken of by the scribes. The dawn's earlier halo had faded behind the city wall, yet the flame in Miriam's eyes still burned red, lighting the road ahead like a torch. Sand whipped her cheeks, wind shrieked in her ears. Each grain only deepened her resolve to plant sacred justice in the desert of human hearts. Iron spikes grated on stone before her, while behind her the women's chorus kept humming, turning a scene of violence into a counter-symphony. Hobnails sowing terror, bare hands sowing hope. The silent message of that march slipped beyond Jerusalem's ramparts, crossed an ocean of years, and reached modern cities where American listeners now pause. A common widow transforms faith into concrete deeds, recalling a frontline nurse, a teacher shielding pupils, a citizen standing between protest lines to protect the vulnerable. Miriam thus becomes an everyday emblem of truth. Real strength lies not in weapons, but in the courage that sustains life amid swords and spears. The sisterly circle of old keeps resonating, reminding us that every act of love echoes far beyond its moment. A gray western sky tilted its final band of sunlight, gilding the dust clinging to the procession's heels. In that wan glow, Miriam's shadow stretched long, linking past to the future unfolding before the audience. Her story proves that a single nameless drop of water can kindle a flame bright enough to guide an entire community. Golgotha lay bare beneath the noonday sky. Its ashen clay carried a rusty hue like an old wound, and crosswinds whipped dust and iron scent together, draping the hill in an indescribable taste of blood. The execution squad planted the cross, its beam hooked into a fissured rock. When the first spike struck wood, the clash of metal tore apart an air already suffocating. The sound rolled to the horizon, triggering a violent reaction across the heavens. A blazing shaft of light abruptly died, while a deep violet curtain swept in from the west, descending like a mournful velvet shroud over Jerusalem. Thunder echoed long. The crowd shuddered in terror. Miriam's stomach knotted, was hurled into a vortex of panic. Reason urged her to flee, yet her soul anchored her at the foot of the hill, forcing her to face the greatest test of courage. Beside her, Salome collapsed, crushed by fate's weight. Her friends' whispered despair reminded Miriam that, to human eyes, the victim's destiny was sealed and irreversible. In the chaos that eroded resolve, the memory of a green fire dream hauled Miriam back from the brink. She stepped over jagged stones, knelt where the cross's root bit into earth, pressed her palms against dry dust, and felt a faint phosphorescence pulse within a silent crack. A warm current traveled up her spine, an unspoken assurance that righteous tears had reached heaven. The ground did not split open, yet Miriam's heart steadied, firm as bedrock beneath her feet. She rose, and in that instant, the concentrated dread encircling the hill ruptured with a wordless cry. Only heartbeats and fierce breath remained. Turning towards scattered women trembling in horror, she summoned every ounce of inner strength. Though individual words were lost, all understood her urgent plea. Let the daughters of Jerusalem turn their weeping inward, so pain might become a vein of wisdom running into bone. The strange timbre traveled farther than the mob's frenzy, piercing fear's barricade, reaching the ears of a young Roman soldier. As though a dormant nerve had been struck, he lowered his weapon, sank to the rough ground, and let tears fall along a path of freedom never before allowed. That solitary act cleaved the empire's machine of indifference like a plow through hardened chains. Daylight vanished, the sun was fully eclipsed, and vision shrank inside a blurred gloom, while every noise reverberated against cavernous silence. Miriam listened, hearing her own heartbeat fuse with the pounding chest of countless others. A solemn, shared rhythm, proving that grief can harmonize more deeply than any psalm. Then the crucified one's final breath ascended, light as a feather, weighty as an ocean. When that stream of life dispersed into the air, night congealed for 3 hours, and all believed the sky itself had ceased to breathe. From afar, temple trumpets wailed, slicing through the dense veil of nothingness, sketching a jagged, mournful line across the sky as if sounding a dirge for earth and heaven alike. In that man-made darkness, deep within the city, the veil before the Holy of Holies tore from top to bottom. The hidden rupture sent shockwaves through the earth, striking Miriam's soles, rippling beneath every stone on Golgotha. She felt the tremor like the universe's pulse, signaling that grace had burst through walls, opening redemption's path without class, race, or age barriers. The quake subsided, the gloom withdrew, and the first strand of sunset slipped into view, light as a silk ribbon at the horizon's hem. On the graveled plain, the crosses cast long shadows, pointing as markers toward the future. Standing at the crossroads of sorrow and hope, Miriam sensed the blood-drenched burden on humanity's shoulders, both pressing and lifting her. Summoning courage from her deepest core, she knew that her small actions, from the morning's offered water to the outcry in darkness, were now joined to the petitions of many compassionate hearts. Time coiled around the hill, carrying the memory beyond Judea's desert, across the Jordan, over oceans and centuries, until it touched modern American souls. The enduring message flared bright. Spiritual power wears no armor, carries no weapon, yet remains potent enough to strike conscience and shatter chains of injustice. Thus, Golgotha's tragic summit does not seal the heart in despair. It opens it with a primordial bud of hope, a gentle flash like a newborn moon, heralding dawn yet to come. Miriam bowed, picked up a blood-spattered pebble at the cross's base, and slipped it into her cloak as a sacred keepsake. Reminder that beneath every human wound, redemption quietly germinates. Turning, she saw the women gathering. Their eyes shimmered with mingled grief and relief. They had witnessed humanity's darkest face, yet felt the first spark of divine justice. Silent gratitude stirred within her for the Roman youth who wept, a bold exclamation proving compassion is not extinguished by barren power. As the crow, 3 days after the blood-soaked afternoon upon Skull Hill, the Passover market awoke to a strange commotion. Whispers claimed that the stone tomb in the Garden of Golgotha stood wide open. The burial cloth lay neatly folded. The guards had fled in panic. That news, light as early summer wind, yet more incendiary than any wick, slid along the city walls, spiraled through grain cellar tents, and slowed millstones mid-turn. Haggling voices shattered like pottery shards. Within that rare pocket of quiet, Miriam's heart struck a new cadence. The empty chamber had become a doorway through which unrestrained joy burst. Tears once briny now tasted sweet, like first-season honey that appears only when night surrenders to an indomitable dawn. Elation quickly rooted itself in concise resolve. By midday, the rickety wooden bolt of her clay brick home was removed. The rough door flung wide, letting the Nicene sun flood every corner. A low table slid against the wall, a straw mat unfurled across the floor. A pot of hyssop water simmered on charcoal, and olive oil blended with herbs released a gentle incense. From that moment on, Miriam's roof ceased to be a closed refuge for three. It was redefined as a way station for wanderers, the sick, poor widows, freed slaves, and any weary soul brave enough to knock lightly upon the frame. No signboard was needed. A farmer with hands cracked from stone-hard soil, a young mother cradling a feverish child, 3 slaves scarred by whips. all found their way. Miriam broke her scant loaf into pieces, washed wounds with warm water, and tore an old shawl into bandages. Faith took the shape of a steaming bowl of porridge, a threadbare blanket, an understanding smile. Prayer became the act of ladling water, stoking coals, soaking up sweat. At night, the fire was tended through each watch, warming a room one size for three, but now abandoned by kindness, like a small sanctuary glowing in the desert. Over the following days, the courtyard turned into a marketplace of compassion. Salome brought goat milk. A trader offered scraps of cloth. Orphans wove palm leaves into mats in exchange for hot soup. The network of sharing needed no charter. It spread as swiftly as a field of grain after the first rain, past the city gate and travelers' footsteps, and blossomed into legend at Phoenician docks. A Jewish widow had transformed her humble clay roof into a community infirmary, a living illustration of faith that dares to convert tears into deeds. That tiny stop taught an entire city that mercy is measured not by purse size, but by the warmth of an open hand. From humble roots, the seed of sacred justice drifted like willow spores across the Mediterranean into letters of Greek scholars, echoing over marble forums in Rome. Details shifted with each retelling, yet the core remained. When faith pairs with courage, suffering turns into healing. And women, once pushed to the margin of the page, hold the keys that unlock hope's gate. The current flowed through centuries until one day it anchored on global screens, reminding viewers that compassion forever seeks new forms in which to live. American audiences, whether seated in a Manhattan high-rise or a truck crossing the Arizona desert, may realize their own living rooms can become modern inns. An armchair for a veteran with PTSD, a kitchen shelf offering leftover meals, an evening spent teaching digital skills to an elderly neighbor. Sacred justice requires no stone palace or squadron of guards. It needs only an open door and two willing hands. Thus, ancient tears water today's cracked ground. Yesterday's courage blooms amid concrete gardens. And timeless wisdom mingles with a morning cup of coffee, reminding every heart that holy ground sometimes begins right at the doorstep. Miriam's story certifies that women of the Bible are not silent footnotes, but drum beats that launch history into motion. Their tears sow justice. Their bravery germinates grace among the stones. Their wisdom erects shelters for generations to come. As this tale travels to America today, it carries a message beyond fashionable slogans. Every community needs someone willing to weep with the afflicted and then rise beside them. For the circle of redemption closes only when compassion becomes bread, water, shelter, and a second chance. When sunset settles upon the clay roof, the flickering oil lamp does not chase away fear. It announces a revolution of hope. And as the video frame fades, a gentle yet firm voice invites each viewer to turn emotion into movement. Press. Subscribe to journey with the next resilient example. Leave a comment to illuminate the conversation. Share the story across every state still missing a compassionate hand. May grace and sacred justice follow every act of sharing, leading toward the next episode, where Rahab, torch of faith within Jericho's walls, awaits her moment to shine.